great opportunity to have a smart discussion about why workplace meetings are bullshit. So, Jeffrey Toobin has been suspended from The New Yorker after his giant mistake in leaving his web camera on during a work Zoom meeting. And basically, he got caught rubbing one out. That's what happened. He did it on accident. It was a mistake. I don't want to get into this discussion about morality because that discussion has been had on every single show imaginable. But I think that what happened to Jeffrey Toobin was an opportunity to discuss something that's been avoided or ignored. And that's the topic of unnecessary workplace meetings. Now, for anybody who carefully read that story, the article posted by Vice specifically, you came across an excerpt that is concerning for The New Yorker, which is a print publication. Apparently, the meeting was about an election simulation. The people engaged in this meeting were participating in an election simulation. Why? We don't know. What could this possibly do to help these individuals do better reporting on the election? Maybe there's something we don't know. But let me read you the excerpt that details exactly what was going down when Jeffrey Toobin was caught or seen performing a little self-love. The call was an election simulation featuring many of The New Yorker's biggest stars, many of whom I'm not even familiar with. But anyway, Jane Mayer was playing establishment Republicans. Evan Osnos was Joe Biden. Jelani Cobb was establishment Democrats. Masha Gessen played Donald Trump. Andrew Morantz was the far right. Sue Halpern was left-wing Democrats. Dexter Filkins was the military, and Jeffrey Toobin was playing the courts and performing a little self-love. Now, what was sad and pathetic wasn't what Toobin was doing, although I'm sure people will disagree with me on that. What's sad and pathetic is the fact that they were having this meeting in the first place. And really what we need to call into question is why so many of us get dragged into these ridiculous workplace meetings, which when you really think about it, are nothing more than an opportunity for the professional managerial class to flex its muscle and show everybody how hard they're working and how awesome they really are. In reality, what they're doing is they're taking time away from the projects that we want to be working on. They're taking time away, in a lot of cases these days, from time that we want to spend with our families or time that we want to spend on ourselves. And instead, we're doing these ridiculous meetings where we're doing election simulations or we're having discussions about the work that we are gonna do. Why don't we just do the work that we're supposed to do? Why do we have to have a discussion about it? And a lot of these meetings end up being aimless and a disastrous waste of time. Even Mark Cuban has said multiple times that he hates meetings, thinks that they're unproductive, and says that he refuses to engage in a meeting unless someone is writing him a check to do so. But when it comes to the average worker, we're expected to say yes to these meetings. We're not allowed to question them. We're not allowed to question whether or not they're necessary or productive. We just have to do it, because if we don't, we're not being a team player. Our participation in the workplace isn't evident enough to the PMC. And it's just starting to really rub me the wrong way, mostly because there's a billion other things that I'd rather be doing than sitting in a meeting that's nothing more than a gigantic circle jerk for the PMC. So let me make my case, because I know I shared a lot of commentary and opinion already without providing any evidence. But I do want to talk about just how much of a waste of time they really are. In fact, there are authors who have written entire books about how they're a waste of time. Here's one example.
An estimated 55 million meetings happen at workplaces across the nation every day. 55 million a day. One study shows 9 out of 10 employees admit to daydreaming during meetings, John Dickerson. In another survey, 47% said having to attend too many meetings is the #1 time waster in New York. And your book got jokes, too. A meeting is an event where minutes are taken and hours are wasted. If I die, I hope it's during a staff meeting because the transition to death would be so subtle. I'm pretty sure the dinosaurs died out when they stopped gathering food and started having meetings to discuss gathering foods.
And look, it's not just about that author. It's also about Harvard Business Review. They looked into this. They did a study, and here's what they found. We surveyed 182 senior managers in a range of industries. 65% said meetings keep them from completing their work. True. 71% said meetings are unproductive and inefficient. 64% said meetings come at the expense of deep thinking. Also very true. And 62% said meetings miss opportunities to bring the team closer together. Because honestly, the best collaboration happens organically. It doesn't happen when a manager forces you or drags you into a meeting that's not really about being productive or collaborating or coming up with creative ideas. Again, most meetings are all about showing to the rest of the company that these managers are participating in the workplace, they're organizing things, they're working hard, but in reality, it's all theater. It's all a waste of time. Am I saying all meetings are a waste of time? No, but most of them are, and that's based on actual senior managers who were surveyed by Harvard Business Review. They also found that constant meetings interrupt the flow of deep work. And I think we've all experienced that, where we're in the zone, we're doing our thing. In my case, I'm writing up a segment that I'm excited to do on this show. And then all of a sudden I get that ding on my phone telling me in 10 minutes, you have a staff meeting. What are you gonna accomplish in that staff meeting? Nothing. But it's just a way for you to let everyone know that you're working. It's a way of monitoring you. And I think most people get that. So let me tell you more about what tends to happen psychologically as we engage in these meetings. And I think it's important to talk about this because it might explain what happened to Jeffrey Toobin. So in a TED Talk, Ellen DeBerjun, a professor of neurocognitive clinical psychology, said this: if a meeting goes on forever, as they tend to do, it's very hard to keep focused. A meeting is a place where you have to keep your emotions in check. You can't say career-killing things out loud. You can't show that actually you'd rather be somewhere else. You can't drop your pants in front of your boss and say, this is how I feel about that. And all of that requires self-control. That's emotionally exhausting. Psychologists call this type of exhaustion ego depletion. And in such a state, people begin to give into temptations. You can't see it, of course, but in a meeting, several of your colleagues are probably thinking about sex. I mean, honestly, I don't think about sex during meetings, but I can understand how others would. And so it's interesting to see that there's actually been some psychological study into what happens to a person's mind as they're forced into these meetings and forced to control every form of communication, verbal, nonverbal. You have to be the perfect employee. You have to pretend like you enjoy being there, and you have to pretend like you're paying attention even as you're thinking about a litany of other things. For me, it's usually the giant mountain of work that I need to get to, but I can't get to because I'm stuck in this stupid meeting. So, why do we all have meetings? Like, what is the point? What really happens? Well, as I mentioned, it's meant to give this illusion of hard work. It's all about posturing. And again, it goes back to the point that a lot of these meetings tend to be a giant waste of time. Crystal DaCosta from Scientific American writes, in business, meetings have become something resembling the mythological Hydra. As senior team members vie for visibility to preserve their place within the organization, this creates circular discussions where decisions are delayed and time is wasted as people take the floor to posture. A multi-headed beast emerges where each head has its own objectives and goals and is resistant to consolidating resources or information because it detracts from any singular individual's position. Meetings don't move us forward. They lack closure. And that's very much done on purpose. So as the pandemic weren't stressful enough, remember, a lot of Americans are working from home now. And the PMC loves to keep an eye on us. They want to make sure that we're working hard enough. They want to justify paying us what they're paying us. And so since so many Americans are working from home, unfortunately, we're seeing the emergence of software that has the very purpose of essentially monitoring workers as they're working remotely. Here's a quick CBS News report explaining how.
As many people are working from home during the coronavirus pandemic, some employers are turning to software to monitor what their employees are doing all day long. The technology does things like take screen grabs or monitor how long they're active on their computer. The software companies say it allows employers to see how productive their employees have been. This comes as a study by MIT in April found that nearly half of the U.S. workforce is now working from home.
It is kind of fascinating that managers want to make sure that we're being productive because one of the best ways to open up space for us to be productive is to not drag us into their meetings, which are only intended to posture and to show everyone how hard they're working, allegedly working. And so as work becomes more and more intrusive in our personal lives, my question is, when are we supposed to be people? When are we supposed to not be monitored? When do we get some free time to be with our families? When do we get some free time to actually engage in deep thinking and be creative? My best ideas don't develop during these meetings. They don't develop when I'm forced to do things that are just meant to communicate to my employers that I'm working hard. The best creative ideas I come up with is when I have a little bit of space to be myself. And quite honestly, when I have some space to not work, when I have some time to go for a run, when I have some time to play with my dog, when I have some time to have a conversation with my husband, those are the moments where I come up with ideas. Those are the moments where I feel like a human being who's excited to go back to the workplace or who's excited to get back to that project I've been working on. But increasingly, and especially during this pandemic, Americans are seeing their employers become more intrusive, more invasive. We're expected to be on call 24/7. After putting in a full day of work, we're expected to log on to Zoom and engage in some nonsense meeting with nonsense planning about some nonsense event. And so every single scientist who's written about this, every single self-help book for managers that I've come across, never addresses this by saying, hey, how about we not have dumb meetings? It's always about, well, maybe you need to come up with a better agenda. No, how about no? How about no? How about not having to monitor every single moment of everyone's life, and that includes middle management, so we can be people who enjoy going back to work, rather than being these robots who are constantly controlled and constantly judged by our employers. Nando.
Wow, that one came from the heart, Anna. That one was delivered with a sense of righteous fury and anger that seems like it came from within. I mean, I think anyone watching this can relate to that. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, you know, the late David Graeber wrote a book called Bullshit Jobs, in which he described he basically made the claim that over half of the jobs in the United States, or like in developed capitalist economies, are essentially meaningless, and that, you know, given the technological advances that we have, that we should be working so much less to do the stuff that society needs, but nevertheless we're working more than ever. Certainly in the United States, right? We're just like that. The amount of hours that people are working is higher than ever, and there's less stuff that we need to do. Like, you know, technology does a lot more of the basic things that we need to survive, and a lot of it is just this idea, like you said, that it has to perpetuate itself. It has to justify itself, and these middle managers are just kind of constantly trying to show their worth by scheduling these mind-numbing meetings, and it seems to have only gotten worse in the pandemic. You know, it's like, since no one's around at work, they want to schedule the meetings just to keep you occupied, I guess, at home, instead of, like, you know, pulling a Jeff Toobin.
And look, I hesitate to get into it too much because people are always looking for something ridiculous to attack you on. And I don't know what Jeffrey Toobin's schedule is like. But look, my point is, all of this like busy work that we're forced into engaging in just to like show that we're working, takes time away from our personal lives. And when you I'm not saying like you're in a work meeting and like, yeah, you wanna rub one out, do it. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, as work becomes more and more intrusive in our personal lives, and as we're expected to be on call 24/7 because it's the pandemic, people who are fortunate enough to work from home you can't say like, no, I'm sorry, I'm not available for that meeting, or I'm not available for this, because everyone is home. And so you get sucked into extra meetings that don't mean anything. When do we get to be humans? Like, when do we get to be people who aren't constantly working? When do we get to engage in activities that aren't related to our work? You get what I'm saying?
Totally.
So part of me feels bad.
No, and here in America, like the people's self-worth is so tied to work, to their work, like into the way they are at work. Like, it used to be kind of a very kind of basic thing on the left to advocate and organize and fight for the right to do less work. I mean, there was the 8-hour workday was like, 8 hours for sleep, 8 hours for work, and 8 hours for whatever the hell I want to do with my life. And that was fought for and won, through struggle. And the weekend obviously was a thing. Like, I mean, I'm surprised that it's not more of an issue. Like, why don't we just do a 3-day weekend, like every single weekend instead of a 2-day weekend? And it's something that we can fight for. Like, I remember when France passed the 35-hour work week, whatever that was, like years ago. Just the reaction here from everyone, not just like right-wing ghouls, was like, look at these, Frenchy lazy people that they don't want to work and the thing. And it's like, that sounds great. That sounds,
Nando,
that sounds amazing.
It does sound amazing. And I'm so happy you brought that up, because I remember talking about that story. It was a long time ago. So I'm actually kind of terrified. 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm terrified to go back and hear what I had to say back then. But no, I don't want to live to work. I don't want to live to work. Like, every year passes by quicker and quicker, and I want to enjoy my family. Like, I want to enjoy just the simple things in life. I want to go for a walk and just enjoy nature and the beauty around me. But we get sucked into nonsense all the time. And so really the question becomes, what is the point of life? Is the point of life to constantly be working, or is it to really value and enjoy every moment and make every moment count? In order to make every moment count, your work needs to mean something. Yeah. And a lot of times these meetings mean nothing. And that's what's been really frustrating me lately.
Reading a lot about the late Soviet Union and the sort of transition in the Soviet Union from after it collapsed from communism to capitalism, like, one of the things that people who lived through that kind of bemoaned a lot was that when Russia went capitalist in the 90s, obviously all kinds of chaos and social collapse. But one of the things people will talk about is that, like, it used to be that, like, an air traffic controller and a factory worker and whatever, like, had time to read, like, the Russian classics and books about theory and things like that. And then it would, and like, basically overnight, when it went capitalist and obviously everyone had to kind of hustle, to basically scrape by and make a living, like, all of that just went out the window. And like the next generation of Russians was just not into those things, like, the finer things in life, classical music, the thing, like, all that just went out the window overnight. It's a shame. Like, there should be more of a impetus and push to work less. Like, we don't really need to be working, like, for society to function, for us to live lives of unbelievable comfort. Like, we have all that at our disposal right now. Like, half of the work that we do, like, I mean, literally half the work, it seems like, is just completely pointless. So yeah. No, I loved it. It was great. Came from the heart.
Yeah, it's a good point. I would love some time to read A Kick in the Belly. I would love it, but I don't have time.
No, I don't have time. I don't have time either. Yeah.